Hello and welcome to the Uneducated PT Podcast with me, your host, Carl O'Rourke. The goal of this podcast is to bring on interesting and knowledgeable people from all walks of life, learn a little something from each conversation, and for you, the listener, to learn something from each episode. So don't forget to subscribe to the channel, press the box below, show some support, and I'll see you on the next episode. Ciara, can you share what inspired you to work with people facing challenges around body image and disordered eating, and talk a little bit about your own story and your own experiences and how you ended up in the work that you're in today?
Yes, of course. So thank you for having me, firstly. But so I think the whole purpose behind helping people with body image and like relationship with food was just purely because of, sounds very selfish, but purely because of my own story. And I knew what it was like to be so alone in that journey and to have or to feel as though you had absolutely no help. And it took me a good couple of years to ever even get my relationship with food and body image, quote unquote, on the right track. Because I didn't feel like, there's only now that I'm looking and I'm like, oh my God, there's so much information out there. But I honestly think that that's because I'm in the industry now, that I see the information everywhere. But when I was going through it, I didn't have one person to tell me. I didn't even know I had body dysmorphia, didn't even know I had disordered eating. I didn't know any of these things until it was literally displayed in my body image. And I was on probably the spectrum of like just on the verge of anorexia. And it was only then, because people around me were worried about me, I was just like, oh, actually maybe I do have an issue. So I do think that that's mainly just bringing awareness to that. And I feel like I've always been, even on my social media, I'm very much, I would come across, I hope, like an open book. I'm very vulnerable. I talk about a lot of stuff, and it's a lot of the taboo topics that I'm sure we'll get into now, but like the likes of disordered eating, being on the verge of like such severe restriction, and being so warped in my own mind that I was literally on the verge of anorexia. But then also swinging the opposite end, where I feel like a lot of people don't speak about enough, is like the binge eating. And I feel like that's something that so many people are experiencing, but they won't talk about it and they just brush it under the rug as if it's like, oh, it won't happen again, or it's nothing, and it's a continuous cycle. And whether people are, binging and then purging afterwards, like there's so many disorder things happening right now, which I'm sure you've seen in the industry and working firsthand with clients. So yeah, I think that's just mainly what inspires me every single day to keep sharing a message. Even though some days I actually forget it and I forget that it's ever even helping anybody. Um, but that definitely inspires me to kind of keep going and just keep sharing a positive message.
Yeah, I definitely resonate with what you're saying in terms of, all right, like now that this is such it's a part of your life because you've gone through that journey, you see
Yeah.
it everywhere, and that's almost your echo chamber of like you see what you're thinking about. But I suppose you back then, you're not seeing any of that kind of information because you're not
Mhm.
even searching for that information. Like the people who need help in terms of like good messages, like the message that you share, they're probably on the other spectrum of the internet. That's a lot of kind of diet culture and fat loss and
Literally.
transformation and photo shoots and stuff like that.
Yeah, and I think again we were just literally talking about like content and everything else, but I've got so, because I'm doing it so long, I'm probably doing it 4 years now, that creating content at the start came so naturally to me. And maybe that was because the journey was so fresh.
Yeah.
But now I feel like I'm in an industry where I'm seeing it everywhere. So I feel as though it's not that it's not making a difference, but it's just like sometimes you can't get in your own head. I'm not gonna act like I don't and be like, what's the point? Like, is anybody actually even seeing anything? Is anybody resonating? And I think, yeah, I just think because it becomes your everyday thing to do, you forget that there is people who haven't seen your content at all ever before, or haven't heard your message before. And yeah, that's why I'm just buzzing to be probably back speaking on something like this, because you do forget that there is people who literally have never heard your story before.
Yeah. And you're writing and talking about content for old care and not for new care, but it can be hard to remember that.
So hard.
Yeah.
So
There was something that you said there as well, and I think I see it a lot as well. It's like coaches end up becoming the person that coaches that the person that they actually needed. And that probably relates to you.
Yeah, I think I seen a quote of something got to do with that as well. Like I think it was actually last night, so it's funny that you've actually said that. But yeah, I just feel like I've slowly but surely morphed into exactly who I needed.
Yeah.
You know, like when I first started out, I'm not gonna lie, I was warped with diet culture. Like, you know, 24/7, you know, we all have the same 24 hours in the day and all of that, like, you know, kind of hustle culture. I was definitely warped into that and self-development and everything else. And it's all great to a certain extent, but then it just gets a point where it's just like you're actually just promoting disordered eating, you're promoting disordered habits. And yeah, I slowly but surely had the confidence then to finally step into what I wanted to do. But I do think for a long time before that, because I was struggling with my own, and I do think a lot of PTs or, you know, online coaches or just coaches in general hold themselves back because for me, for a long time, I felt like a fraud because I was still struggling with my relationship with food and body image as I became a coach.
Yeah.
But I actually think that that's why most coaches become a coach, is because they are struggling with those things. Um, but I think at the time I just didn't have any of that knowledge. I didn't know any coach struggled with that. So I was like, Kira, you are the biggest fraud ever. Like, how can you tell someone one thing, but you're over here also struggling with your body image and your relationship with food? And I think that was the hardest battle for so long, that I didn't allow myself to kind of really step into body image and relationship with food until I felt like mine was really in a good place, or at least, quote unquote, I hate the word, but under control. Because the fraud stuff just got to me so much. So I don't know if you can relate to that in any way, but it's funny that I just think now that it's been so normalized that it's actually okay for a coach to struggle with X, Y, and Z and also still be helping. Do you know, I remember one of my coaches said to me, like, you go, like, just because a therapist is a therapist doesn't mean that she doesn't struggle with her own head. You know, and I think that's the same for us. And I just think we just don't think like that sometimes when
Yeah.
we're in it.
Well, that's yeah, that's us being up in our heads, isn't it? But I completely agree. I think like I've always said this time and time again, that personal trainers and online coaches are the most insecure people in the world. And I'm not saying that from like a place of judgment. I'll say that like
Yeah,
I'm the most insecure person in the world. You know what I mean?
I know.
And I'll go on about X, Y, and Z. And like people would say to me, oh, you're so confident, like, you know, talking in front of a camera or doing this and that. And I'm like, if only you knew.
I know. This is the bizarre thing. I think people do see on a camera and it's like they mightn't have the balls to speak on a camera, but I'm like, honestly, put me in person, put me in a group setting, put me in anything, and I'm like, I can also shrivel up into this insecure, shy person.
Yeah.
So I do think we all just have our own struggles, but I don't know where this idea of, you know, being perfect or acting like we had no struggles came from. Because I definitely fell into that for a long time and hid my binging, I hid my relationship with food, I hid the fact that I struggled with with my body image for so long that it actually just ended up eating me up. And then I was also sharing on social media at the time, and it was just constant conflict in my head. Um, so yeah, it was wild, wild one.
So for people who might not understand about body image, like how did poor body image typically manifest itself in your daily life at the time?
Yeah, good question. So yeah, poor body image, I think for me, it started when I was obviously very young. I think it was maybe like 14, 15. And for me, I always just felt like the fat friend. And I couldn't explain to anybody. Like, if you asked me what I was feeling, probably now I'd understand. But back then, I didn't understand what I was actually feeling. But I do think the root of that was I'm not good enough.
Mm.
But it manifested in I was looking at all my girls and I was like, using getting attention off the boys. I don't feel like I'm getting attention. I feel like I look different to yous. And yeah, it just kind of manifested in so many different ways, in the sense of like afraid to be in bikinis, afraid to be in photos, and just constantly feeling so different and just not good enough compared to my friends. And none of them ever made me feel like that. But that was just something that I kind of grew up believing. And then for me, it just kind of turned into, okay, well, I'm going to change that about myself. If I'm not feeling good enough because of how I look, which wasn't actually the case, but that's kind of how I understood it in my head. I was just looking at my body and being like, okay, well, I'm not good enough because I don't look like these girls. So I was like, I'm going to go and change all of that. And I slowly but surely got into the gym and doing cardio and like looking after my food. And for the first while, I didn't really see any results until, like, I swear to God, I literally woke up one day and I was like, oh, wow, you look very different. But I won't lie and say that I didn't. I absolutely loved that because I'd been so warped in my head, convincing myself that I was gonna feel different once I got to this leaner body.
Mm.
And once I got to this thinner body and I was finally gonna be good enough. And slowly but surely, as I see myself getting into a leaner body, I was like, this is absolutely great. This is fantastic. And it just kept getting worse and worse. And the more that people hyped me up, being like, you're so motivating, you're this or you're that, it almost spiraled me even more to keep going and keep going and keep going until there was literally like nothing left of me. And even at that point, I'm not gonna sit here and act like that was even the scariest point for me either,
Yeah.
because I was so like, I can't tell you how obsessed and like disordered your brain becomes, in the sense of like, I knew I was so thin, but because I was maybe finally getting attention, even if it was in the wrong way, I was feeling like, oh, I must be doing something right here because I'm finally getting attention. Now obviously looking at that, you can see there's a lot of childhood stuff there. But it's the attention and it's the not feeling good enough that I really kind of want to emphasize, because we assume that we don't feel good enough just because of how we look,
Yeah.
rather than seeing I didn't feel good enough because of so many different things that had probably gone on in my life. But obviously at a young age, I never understood that. So I think my body image, even then, even though it was like I was loving it and whatever, it was still so warped that I never thought I was thin enough.
Mm.
And I just kept going and kept going until I eventually obviously had to get help, because I was on the verge of anorexia and my mom and dad and everybody else was so worried about me.
Did you come to the realization that you needed to get help, or was it other people kind of?
Other people.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wasn't me. I definitely I didn't volunteer for that one.
Yeah. You were grand
But
in your head.
I was like, I'm fine. Like, don't worry about me. But I do remember like not really, I didn't want the help and I was in denial, but I remember just breaking down one day that I came home and I could see my mom was like just furious with me, like, because she couldn't get through to me. But I remember just coming in and I just broke down one day and I was like, Mom, I just can't do it anymore. I was like, everything I eat, I have to outrun. I was like, I can't cope. And
Did they understand what was going on? Because like obviously, I would say that this generation, our generation, are probably
mm,
a lot more aware of these kind of conditions than they would have been um back then.
yeah, I can't say no. They honestly, to be honest, they just didn't have a clue what was going
Yeah,
on. I don't even think they knew the words for it,
yeah, exactly.
you
Yeah,
know? And I do think that that's just an Irish mentality. If we're going to get into that, I just think it's like brush things under the rug type of thing. It's like try and get them help, but like just brush it under the rug and we'll never
yeah,
talk about it again.
yeah.
So
Oh,
yeah, I just remember.
she's just a bit odd, that Ciara one.
Yeah, she's just going through something at the moment.
Yeah.
But yeah, I remember just coming home and breaking down, and I think that was the moment for me that I was like, okay, I'm ready for some change, but it has to be small, it has to be minuscule.
Yeah.
And yeah, slowly but surely, I obviously went to therapy. Through, I think it was, I don't know, through doctors and stuff, but
Were these therapists specialized in disordered eating and body image and
they were from, Jigsaw. So
yeah,
they did, I think they were specialized, but I think even back then, like now I'm thinking like what, I don't know what year that would have been, but like they just weren't equipped, I don't think, because they came in, from my perspective, they came in so hot and heavy. It was like, okay, we're going to get rid of my fitness pal. You're going to stop doing this. You're going to stop doing that. And to be honest, from my experience, anybody who's in that, they need leeway.
yeah,
They need some control, because
yeah,
you can't take all my control away from me right now. It's like, it's enough for me to even want to be here and get help.
yeah. And
But
you need to have trust in that therapist as well, probably.
exactly. So coming in on the first session being like, we're gonna do X, Y, and Z, it's like,
Yeah.
oh, slow it down. I'm
Yeah.
gonna run the other way if you keep it up. So yeah, she did kind of come in a bit hot and heavy, so I didn't really like that. And I was in a bit of denial. And then I think I wanted everyone off my back about it, but I wanted to stay disordered. Does that make sense? So I didn't actually really want the help. I wanted to just get everyone off my case. I was like, I'm gonna eat a little bit more, but I was doing it in a controlled manner. So everything was tracked, everything was weighed. Even if I was eating more, it was weighing my bleeding iceberg lettuce at like, do you know what I mean? Like just such disordered stuff that you're like, you don't need to weigh that, but that kind of kept, for everyone else's sake, that kept them happy, you know. And I was like, well, I still get to control my food, I still get to control my body image, so I don't ever go back to that place that makes me feel like I'm not good enough.
Yeah.
You know, so I slowly but surely started eating more and started eating more. But then what happened was, because of this, I suppose, eating more, I was like saving all of my calories for the evening time. And I remember every evening I'd be just like a bloody like my stomach would be so rock solid, because I was out there shoving about like 1,500 calories into my mouth, because I was like, this is great, I have so much food for the evening, you know, probably eat so little during the day, but then I was like, I've loads to have in the evening. But then I think what started to happening was that started to just become like a binge, but a controlled binge. One that I felt like, okay, well, I'm burning 3,000 calories on my watch, so as long as I eat below that, I'm absolutely fine. And that's kind of slowly but surely started to happen. And then I think my routine, life was changing. I think I was going into college and stuff. And everybody knows, if you're stuck in a very rigid routine, the minute that starts to change, you throw an absolute hissy fit. So things started to change for me. I think I was doing a PT course at the same time. Like, I was constantly running away from myself. My day was like jam packed from morning to night. And this is kind of when I started to experience more frequent binging. And it became like, I went from every night, or not every night, sorry, once a week probably, then to every single night. And I literally had went from like probably coming home like I was like in a lean body, let's just say, or a smaller body, and then I went to being in a much bigger body. And for me, I couldn't comprehend, because I was known as such a motivated girl who went to the gym. Yeah, I was still going to the gym all the time. Yeah, I was getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And for somebody, I couldn't explain that to anybody who ever looked at me. So I used to just go up to people, anybody who hadn't seen me in a long time. I'd be like, oh yeah, hello. I know I've put on weight. And I would address that about myself, because I was so afraid of people's judgment, that I wanted to get there first.
Yeah, you wanted to, so they couldn't hurt you. You say it first, kind of
I
thing.
say it first, yeah. So I knew everybody was, even like, I remember working where I work at the time. I remember working in Pennies, and I had like an extra large top on me at the time, and I was still experienced, like, I was binging in Pennies in the toilets, like bringing food in with me. And I remember one of the managers just turning around to me, and she was like, "Oh, like, now obviously we know you never obviously say this to someone, but." She just pulled me aside and she was like, I just want to ask, like, are you like pregnant or something? And like, I mean, that like broke my entire world, because I was like, couldn't also understand at the time why I kept eating and why I just couldn't stop. But it was just happening every single day. It was like a genuinely like a, what's the word? Like a compulsive behavior, maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I couldn't stop it. And I remember hearing that, and I was just like, that was like probably one of the worst moments for me. But I remember the months after that, they just kept getting worse and worse and worse. And I just got to a point where I was just like, I was so down on myself and so down in my body image and how I had got to this place, that I was just like, I actually don't know if I want to be here anymore. And that's, for me, it sounds so extreme, because it's like, Ciara, you're just battling with food. But I honestly don't feel like I was. I was battling with something that I couldn't explain to anybody else.
Yeah,
I couldn't explain.
I always say to people, like, it's never about the food. It's about,
Never about food.
yeah.
And it was like, even there's been people like that I've come across and that I've worked with in the last while, that like, binging is a form of self-harm in its own way. You know, I'm just using food, but because it's food and it's something that we all enjoy on a day-to-day basis, people didn't see it as such a big thing. But I may as well have been self-harming, because it was spiraling me into this absolute cycle of like self-hatred, of disgust, of shame, of anger at myself. And that was only propelling the cycle forward and forward, that every single day I was getting up. It wasn't even happening in the nighttime. I was getting up and I was binging in the morning. And it just followed me and followed me and followed me, until I got to a point, like I said, that I was just like, I don't think I want to be here. And because I was so afraid of those thoughts and where they were going, I was like, I have to go get myself some help. I was like, I have to call someone. So I remember taking myself.
Were you finished with therapy at this point?
I was finished with Jigsaw. Yeah,
Yeah,
I
with
had
Jigsaw.
left. Yeah, I had left Jigsaw. But then this was in around before, just right before I had I was actually before I even became a qualified PT. But I remember just thinking when I went to get myself help, she was like, "Oh yeah, we're gonna get you I'll put you onto psychiatrists and everything else and get you a whole team." And I remember having the first call. We had just gone into lockdown on the first call with a psychiatrist, and he was like, yeah. Can you like obviously describe, are you having any of these thoughts, X, Y, and Z? And I was like, yeah. And he was like, okay, so what we're gonna do is we're actually gonna put you on an antidepressant. And I was just like, I am absolutely not depressed. I was like, and for someone who genuinely didn't know what was going on with regards to the binging, and just like I felt like I couldn't control myself, I knew one thing for sure, and that wasn't that I was depressed. I was like, I need someone to talk to. Um, so I remember I'm saying that, but because lockdown had just hit, everything was at a standstill. So I finally had a minute to breathe. My day wasn't jam packed. I wasn't running from thing to thing to thing. And of course, anybody who is probably a bit disordered like myself, with food and body image, you always think, like I thought to myself, I just want to get back to my lean version because I know that will fix everything.
Yeah.
So of course, when lockdown hit, I was like, let's just get a coach. Let's get a coach who's going to give you a meal plan, who's going to help you with your body image. And yeah, I had myself convinced that was the answer that I needed. I just needed to get back to my restrictive self, and I needed to get back to the leaner version, because I was like, once I get back there, everything will be under control. And that's the thing that we convince ourselves of. I know if anybody is struggling with binging out there, you convince yourself that once you get things back under control, it's all going to be fine again. But it only takes another weekend away or anything to mess up something, that control a little bit again. And that control is then spiraled into lack of control. And then you're just, you're binging on everything. So yeah, sorry, I just kind of stopped there.
And what happened then with this coach, this meal plan? I presume it was like a transformation type of coach.
Yeah, transformation.
For anyone that's not listening, if these are kind of issues that you resonate with, you would probably agree it's probably not the best route to go down.
Absolutely. I'm 100% I'm going to say, I'm going to put my hand on my heart and say it's 100% the wrong route for you to go down. As much as you will convince yourself that, like I just said, that once you get back to that leaner version, everything will be okay. But I can promise you that, yeah, it's not like these abs, your body image, nothing is going to change because this is all within you.
Yeah.
And yeah, I was put on a meal plan, and every week I was like, I'm not going to say he was judging me harshly, but it was just real, like, why are you not losing weight? But that was also upon me to be like, well, I'm not losing weight because I keep bloody binging.
That's their metric of success as a coach, and that's the metric that then they will push for you to achieve, because that means that they're successful, and it means that you're successful, even though that's not what
even though we're all going to be probably a bit disordered, but we'll push it on you in any way. So yeah, and I just think that's, I suppose if I can urge anything, it's just not to go down that route, because if anything, that just, I feel it only pushes the message further and further into you that you need to be leaner, you need to control your food, you need to control your food. And if anything, if you're stuck in a cycle, whether it's restriction or binging, you need to do the opposite of those rules. And it does go against everything that this industry does, probably, like any sort of diet culture says. But for you to really come out of this cycle, you honestly need to do the opposite of everything that I'm after describing: getting on a meal plan, getting a coach that is just solely fat loss based or results driven based. And really going for someone who's going to honor your relationship with food and understand you a little bit more. But yeah, it took me a long time to realize that, because I think I masked that for about a year again.
Yeah.
That I was like, I'm gonna just stay on a meal plan. I'm gonna keep trying and trying and trying. And it wasn't until the binging just kept happening that I was just like, I remember coming across one person online, and she was great, and she was only obviously starting her online and whatever else. And I was just like, she is getting me. She is understanding me. She is talking about relationship with food. I was like, why does she feel so relatable? And I remember just being like, I actually just can't do this anymore. So I was like, I'm gonna have to either take this serious, or this is gonna consume my entire life.
So did you reach out to that person then?
I reached out to, yeah, her name was I think you might know her. It was a Ciara, I always call her Saz, but Ciara Colopy.
Oh yes, yeah.
So I reached out to her, and yeah, it was the best thing I ever done.
Isn't it funny the way that at the very start of this conversation we spoke about how sometimes you feel that your message isn't coming across or no one's listening to it, but then there's you who just needed one person to understand where you're coming from to
Yeah,
actually get you out of that cycle.
I know it's what, and sometimes you really do doubt yourself in the sense of like, I don't think I'm making a difference. But like you said, it's just one message that someone can come across, and it's like a light bulb moment for them.
Yeah. And you need to hear that message at the right time, because you could have probably that person could have came across maybe 2 or 3 years ago, and like maybe the message was always there, but you just didn't see it because you weren't ready to see it.
Yeah, I think people will only accept the help when they're either in a place or, yeah, I think they, like you said, they're ready to.
Yeah, yeah. So what happened then? So let's say you worked with this coach, and what were the kind of steps that were taken in order to uh, put you on a path where you're improving your mental health, your well-being, and your relationship with food and body image?
I think there was a lot of uh just reducing, because I was masking a lot I got into running at the time. I just remember now, and I was
Shock.
masking a lot of, yeah, shock, running away from something. something. But I was masking a lot through running, and I didn't realize that at the time, because I just remember being so delighted that I was running loads. My body image was slowly but surely changing, but I was still experiencing those binging. Um, so when I signed up with her, she was like, "We're gonna 100% have to reduce how much you are walking," because I was doing like
Yeah.
20,000 steps a day, like ridiculous stuff. And she was like, "We're gonna have to reduce that." So I still had some control. I was still tracking my food. Um, just reduced kind of the walk and took the steps down a notch, took training down a little bit of a notch, not anything drastic.
Yeah.
Just 1 or 2 days.
Was that
And
even difficult? Like, would you say were you a difficult client to comply with that, or were you? Yeah.
I was a difficult client at the start, yeah. But because I do think it helps when she was just so harsh, in a sense, not in a mean way, but it was real, like she didn't entertain my bullshit.
Yeah.
And for so long I got away with people entertaining my lies and my cover-ups, whereas she was just like, "No, you're gonna do this. If you
Mm.
don't want to do it, then leave,"
Yeah.
essentially. And that was kind of the best kind of tough love that I needed, because like I said, it's totally dependent on the person, but I was just full of bullshit at the time, that I was like, "I'm just going for a walk," but I was really doing it for an alternative motive, essentially. So I was difficult at the start, and then I remember, I actually was saying this on Shane's podcast as well. I remember her telling me then, we had worked a good couple of weeks on this, but she was like, "We're gonna have to take off the watch," and I was like,
Oh, this
"Absolutely,
I was tracking the steps.
take off the watch and not know how much you're burning on a day?
Yeah.
Absolutely
Yeah.
not." So I do remember a couple of times she was like, "Take it off, put it in a drawer, blah blah blah." I put it in a drawer and I took it back out then. And I'd put it back on me. And there was a couple of times that, but then it was just like I was only fooling myself. Do you know what I mean? So I'm checking in with her and she's like X, Y, and Z, or she's asked me certain questions, and I'm just like, it just got to the point where I was like, "Kira, who are you lying to?" Because you're honestly just, you're only lying to yourself. And yeah, so I eventually did, like, a lot of work, but I did take the watch off. I put it away. Um, was reducing my walk and was reducing my steps. I did experience some binging as I was working with her, which is totally normal. By must I just say, when you do work with a coach and something like this, it is normal that you're going to experience probably more binging.
Yeah.
But if anything, that's the best thing ever, because she helped me understand what was going on previous to the binge, why I then binged, and just a lot of like changing up my food, allowing a lot of balance in. Things like, I remember writing lists of food that I wouldn't have,
Mm.
and slowly but surely each day, even though it's not about the food, but you can really use the food to encourage someone to see that it's okay and it's safe to have balance.
Yeah.
And it's
So
safe to eat these
getting back to
foods.
trusting yourself almost, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I didn't trust myself. So the minute I started incorporating these things in, I started to trust myself around them.
Mm.
Um, and that just got better and better. But I suppose one of the things I'll always say as well, that I completely stand by, is also just feeling safe in that, with that coach. Like, that's such a big thing, because if you don't feel safe, I don't feel like you'll be able to progress as much as you possibly can. And I think she made me feel safe in
Mm.
so many different ways, from whether it was my ability to be vulnerable, whether it was the non-judgment, or how she even approached the whole like check-ins and not having to take photos and all these different things. It was so orientated around repairing my relationship with food.
Yeah.
And that was something I had never experienced before. So I did feel really safe for her. And I think that was just that then almost kind of it was like I jumped my cycle from what should have taken probably a long time. It really didn't take me that long to start grasping things because I trusted her. She didn't take my shit. You know, she was on point with everything she was saying, or check-in responses, everything was just like it was moving so fast, but not so fast that I couldn't grasp it.
Mm.
So yeah, it was a really, not that it was a really quick process. I think I was working for her nearly 9 to 10 months.
Yeah.
But I really I think I was just at a point where I was like, I really want to fix this and I really want to, be in a better place. And it also helped as well that I didn't have the pressure, but I really wanted this for myself. And I also wanted it for my future and my career, that I was like, I'm going this way. I was like, I really want to help people because I know what it's like to struggle with this.
Mm.
So not the quicker, but the more effort that I put into my own relationship with food and body image, the more that I can help someone else. And I was like, at this point, I was helping people already. When I was working with Ciara, I was already helping people online with coaching. So it was even more of a
Which
drive.
also helps you, because it's like,
Yeah,
okay, you're learning something and then you're giving it away to someone else, which actually reinforces the message that you want to
yeah,
give.
yeah, absolutely. So yeah, that's kind of my journey in a nutshell. Don't know if I went too fast
No,
or too
that
quick
was
or not.
perfect, because to be honest, most of the questions that I was going to ask you, you've kind of really touched on all of it in your story, which is actually really great, because obviously the best way for people to learn is to hear from people's stories. Like, there's a few things that I wrote down there, like even when you said about like safety, like having emotional safety with a coach, and
Mm,
not feeling judged. And obviously a big thing that doesn't help in terms of repairing your relationship with food is obviously having guilt and shame, feeling judged, or judging yourself around your food
mm,
decisions, and being
yeah.
able to remove that as much as possible obviously is going to help to repair that relationship. One thing that I wanted to ask you, and you did touch on it a lot, but
Mm,
maybe just to re-emphasize for anyone listening that might be kind of in that situation but not actually realizing they're in that situation, so needs that awareness to understand what's going on. So what are some of the early signs or red flags of disordered eating that people might look over, or might be
mm.
doing now that they don't realize they're doing? And I know you touched on them, but
Great question. Um, yeah, I think the obsessiveness with the watch. I think
yeah,
that's one thing. Sorry, that's just like that propels us, I think, into a cycle of disordered eating, because people are just masking it now as like, oh, I just need to get my steps. But like when you can't go to bed sitting on 9,000 steps,
yeah,
that's an issue.
yeah.
Like if you have to get up out of your bed to go and finish those steps, it is a bit of an issue. And you can call it what you want, of like I'm hitting my goal and stuff, but it's like I think there's planning and there's hitting a goal and everything else and having that kind of structured in your day. But then there's like things like getting up out of bed. Like I've heard so many stories where people do that because of a watch. I think fasting is, if it's done, depending on, people will call it intermittent fasting, so many different fasting. But I think if you're really just because you don't want to eat that many calories during the day, I think if that's your
Mm.
thought process behind fasting, then I would look at that as a bit of an issue. I think you're overtraining. If you're doing that based on like, oh, I had a bad weekend, or I done this, or I ate too much food, and then you're going and like do more cardio or anything along those lines, I think that's a bit of a red flag already. Um, Let me think. I think I do have a good few.
Numbers in general, isn't it? Like whether it's
Mm,
tracking your steps, obsessing about calories and tracking your calories, obsessing about the scales. All these numbers are just
yeah.
ways of you to kind of control.
Yeah, I think control is a big thing, but I don't think a lot of people even know the word, let's just say control, that
Yeah.
they, if we can just be, yeah, if it's just be numbers, like your obsessiveness with the scales or constantly having to check your weight to make sure it hasn't gone up. There was another good one there that I had in my head. Body checking is actually an interesting one that I do think we mask. I do still catch myself. It's not to say, I also want to just emphasize as well, like when I'm talking about these things, it's not to say that I don't struggle with bad
Yeah.
body image. It's not to say that I don't do these things. Well, it's just if you've the awareness and you don't act on those thoughts, completely different thing. But the body checking, something that I would still do. But it's not to the extent of like I'm not pulling at myself, I'm not picking myself apart, I'm not being like, oh, do I still have
It's
this?
a spectrum, isn't it? It's like
Yeah,
it's not like, all right, I'm healed from my relationship now. It's
I
not an
know.
on-off switch. It's like, okay,
Yeah.
now I'm not absolutely destroying my day-to-day quality of life with what's going on.
Yeah, I think that's the thing is that I suppose when you're in the black and white, people want to hear black and white.
Mm.
But the only thing I can encourage is that there's so much gray area and so much balance to be found in this is that like, I can go and train 5 days a week or I can train on holidays now and that's not disordered from me. So I always think if I can give any red flag, it's probably just your mindset behind these things. That is a bit of an like I could stand on the scales tomorrow and then not affect me. I could body check. Like there is a spectrum of where you may fall on, but I think it's your mindset behind the things that you do on a day-to-day basis that makes it a red flag.
Mm, yeah, that makes
Because
sense.
there's a lot of things that I would do or even having bad body image days or whatever, but I don't then act in the behaviors that I would have previously done because of that.
Mm. What are some positive steps or practical steps or tools that people who have bad body image issues can start using or developing to create a more positive or compassionate relationship with their body? Like what even was like some of the shift changes for you?
I think really, and I know people are probably sick of this, but it's like really appreciating all that your body does for you every single day. Like I think people actually we take it for granted, and I used to hate, when you're like someone your mate comes in with such a positive perspective and you just want to rant. I get it. I understand it can be very annoying. But what I'm trying to say is sometimes we just need to zoom out that we're so fixated on how we look, but we forget that we're literally walking around every single day. We can eat food, we can train, we can do all of these amazing things that every like up and down, every heartbreak, everything that you have gone through, your body has been with you through. And I think really appreciating it that it is your home and it is something that's with you for the rest of your life. And sometimes we treat it as if it's not. And that's where I think that this whole like bad body image, because we're so hateful towards it and we're so critical of it. But I think number one, just being aware of what it does for you on a day-to-day basis, but really coming in with this best friend. And people probably hate that as well, but I never shut up about it. But it's like if you woke up, one of the mornings and your best friend was beside you and she was screaming and shouting and being super critical of you from the moment you woke up to the minute you went to sleep, you tell her to fuck off. You wouldn't accept that. But because it's inside of us and it's our own voice, we mask it and we just allow it to happen. And it's just like you wouldn't accept that with your friends. So it's like you can't accept that from yourself.
Mm.
I also think mindfulness is great. Mindfulness just allowed me to become more aware that I was just like the observer of my thoughts. I wasn't actually them.
Mm.
So any thoughts that came in about my body image or when I'd want to jump to hate and like all of those hateful thoughts that came in about myself, I realized that they were just thoughts and I was just observing those thoughts happening within myself. And I know that that can seem a little bit deep, but when you actually sit down, you might realize, okay, my head's a bit chaotic, but the more that you train yourself to sit down in silence or a bit of music playing or a guided meditation, whatever it is, you'll realize that you have all of the power.
Mm.
And I just don't think when you're in so deep in that cycle, you don't think you have any power. You're so helpless, you're so hopeless, and you think that probably your body image is never going to change or it's never going to get better. Or once you do change your body image, that the thoughts will change, but they don't.
Mm.
They just shift to something else or something a little bit more negative, or they pick you apart even more. So it's really training that inner critic within yourself to be quiet,
Mm.
you
So
know?
that's the complete opposite of how you suggested you lived your life when you had disordered eating and bad body image. It was that
Complete
you were
opposite.
constantly on the go all day, yeah, trying to distract yourself or
Yeah.
distract your thoughts.
And I am very aware as well, like, I don't want to sit up here and be like, have a slow lifestyle, because I understand that people do have busy lifestyles, but there is so much mindfulness that you can create in your day, whether it's driving to work,
Yeah.
being a bit more aware, whether it's when you're eating your lunch, you're being a little bit more mindful eating. But there's so much, you don't have to be sitting down 7 hours a day to have a slow lifestyle. it's actually creating that slowness within yourself, that I think is really important. But yeah, they'd be some of my main tips, but just like challenge your thoughts because they're not really real.
So you used to train and exercise and do cardio to get as thin as you can, essentially. So why do you train now? Because
I think because
I
of
seen you doing your clean and jerks earlier in the video.
yeah. um yeah, I think that's the funny thing as well, and I don't want to overcomplicate things for people as well, but I just find that humans are bizarre and we're just so funny. But we kind of, I wasn't getting my worth from X, Y, and Z anymore, and I literally just spoke about that in my story. But you find your worth in other places, and the gym was definitely a place that I found it in. But I think the reason I train now is genuinely for that feeling afterwards, and to see what my body can honestly do. Like if it doesn't want to push some days, I'm totally fine with that now. But on the days that it does want to push, I'm so intrigued to see how much stronger you can get, not only physically but mentally. And I think that's why I do even like the likes of CrossFit or hybrid training now, because it's just so interesting. I think that's one thing that really can enforce this whole idea. It doesn't have to be super intense workout. It can even be the likes of yoga and stuff. Yoga is great for a positive body image, but it really just reinforces this idea of like, wow, look at what my body can do every single day for me.
Yeah, 100%.
And I'm so focused on picking it apart because it doesn't look a certain way.
Isn't it funny that it can be the same action or behavior, whether that's going for a run, going train and eating a certain food, but it's the intent and your perception around that matters really
Yeah.
most. Yeah.
Yeah. That's a big thing.
I've three more questions for you, and I
Yeah.
always ask these questions at the end of a podcast. These are the wisdom questions. So, if you could give your younger self one piece of advice, knowing what you know now, what would it be?
Oh, first one that came to mind is just don't be so consumed by how you look, because how you look honestly doesn't affect anybody around you, and nobody remembers you for being a size 6 or size 8 or having the best abs at the table. They remember you for the energy you brought. Did you listen to someone? Did you make someone feel at home or welcome or safe? These are all qualities of people that I remember about people. Um, and even looking back and now at any of my friends, I've never once remembered them for how they looked.
Mm. I used to always put this post up. It was like, no one's going to your funeral and talking about what you weighed.
Or what you ate or how
Yeah,
motivated you
yeah,
were.
yeah.
They're
I,
talking
I,
about
I
who
always
you
started
were.
with like, oh, John was such a lovely man. He weighed 62 kilos, and yeah. So it is true though, isn't it? But like, if
Oh, absolutely no one.
yeah, but if losing weight or getting in shape or whatever it is means that like you're a more whole person, so then you can do that for other people, then yeah, it can be a net benefit. But if
Yeah, I do think, and that's also, sorry to just cut across
no,
even
go
these
ahead.
three questions, but I do think that's like something that people, again, this people just want black and white. So they'll take my message and be like, oh, she means like you can never change your body image. But it's like, I can have goals now about my body image. If I want to change my body image, I can do that. But what I'm saying is that it's always like you just said, the intent behind it.
Mm,
It's not self-hatred. It's like there is a lot of people out there who are going to be happier, healthier people if they change their habits and behaviors.
yeah.
But I do think, again, it's totally dependent on the person. And I think most people, or most women who come to me now, they are fat loss clients, but they know that they probably have a disordered relationship with food. So they're like, okay, I want to work on this, and then we can work on that.
Mm. Do you think that you found self-acceptance and inner peace, or is it a work in progress still?
I don't think I have inner peace, but I definitely have self-acceptance for my body. And that has been a long road to get to, but I can't explain like not caring about a roll on my stomach over my shorts. Like, what, maybe that actually is my inner peace with regards to my body image, because now my inner peace is not revolved, like my head isn't revolved around how I look and what food I eat, and that probably from the background I come from is actually inner peace.
Mm.
Um, but the acceptance that I have, and just knowing that my body is so intelligent and it will tell me exactly what I need to do for it and when I need to do it. And I think that's what most people doubt, and they honestly think I'm probably making that up, but I can promise you that people are so worried about putting on weight and everything. But I'm like, if you tune into your hunger cues and your fullness cues, I promise you, you will find a happy medium for yourself, and your body will always tell you when it needs more fuel or it needs more it needs more food. And I think that that's just something over the last year that I've really started to tune in to, is that even when I put on weight, like we were speaking about before we came on in Bali, I didn't jump straight to a diet. I didn't jump straight to, I was like, I need to sit in this and I need to learn how to be okay with this, because I know when I come home or I get to start moving again, because that's what I enjoy to do, my body is going to regulate itself again. And that it had done exactly what I thought it was going to do. So if I can encourage anything, it's really just to tune into your body, because I promise you it's way more intelligent than what we think we are.
Love that. Last question I have for you is, what do you believe is the biggest obstacle that you face in the pursuit of happiness, fulfillment, and success?
Wow. So that's just in any area of my life?
Yeah, whatever you feel it is brings you
Sorry, Mom.
happiness, fulfillment, and success. So what do you think is the biggest obstacle that you face? Let's just even put it in terms of happiness. So what do you believe is the biggest obstacle that you face in the pursuit of your own happiness?
First one that came to mind, self-doubt.
Where does
Self-doubt.
where does self-doubt show up for you now?
Business. I think just even in my personal life, self-doubt was coming through a lot. But again, I obviously, as cliche as it is, I know it's obviously supposed to be what's happening right now. But yeah, I feel like at the moment, without being dramatic, self-doubt is crippling me a little bit. But nothing that, it's not crippling me to the point that I'm not still doing business, or I'm not still posting, or I'm not
It's not stopping you
still
from
putting
doing the
myself.
thing.
Yeah. I'm still trying to feel the fear, even though doubt is right there.
This was brilliant. Listen, if someone wanted to reach out and ask you a couple of questions, maybe wanted to work with you, they've resonated with a lot of what you're saying today, where can they go and find you, Ciara?
My Instagram, main place that you will find me. So it's Ciara O Conner Coaching. But yeah, just message me, send me a DM, whatever. And yeah, I'd love to hear from you.
Thanks for watching. If you like that episode and you want to see more content like this, make sure you're subscribed, and I'll see you on the next one.